Hey guys, today I'm going to be testing out a new tutorial of mine, and this one I'm going to show you how I got this edited photo from the original image, which is this. So I'm just going to go over a bit of my techniques, what I did, and how I was able to achieve this look. I use a lot of these same tips for across all of my photos, so hopefully you enjoy and learn something from my editing process. Okay, so this is the raw unedited photo that I took. So I tried to get the car in focus as much as possible. I shot this at f1.8, so you can see the back of the car is not in is a bit unfocused, right? So it's not as sharp as the headlights here. I could have probably opened it up to f2 or even more, but I do kind of like how the back of the rear end of the car is not completely in focus. So yeah, I did shoot this around sunset time. It was great background, but my in-camera settings for the white balance weren't adjusted to suit the scene, so I can always just change that in post, so that's what I like to do. Now for my editing process, I like to start from the top and work my way down, because the first part of it is usually for the exposure of the scene and just how I want to lay it out. So I just find this process works the best for me. Now I noticed that this photo was very bluish, and I kind of wanted to get it to a more darker yellow, like reds in this. So what I did is I took the temperature, which is the white balance, and I moved it down into the 10,000 range, like right around there. And then I moved down. I didn't touch anything with the tint, but I brought down the exposure of the scene right around here. So I'm going to bring back the exposure on the car, but I'm going to do that separately. I was mainly focusing on the background here. So you can still see the clouds. They're nice. And I'm going to do some changing of the colors for this area right here. I want to make it more of like a blood orange type of feel. For the contrast, I just leave it as is. Highlights is always a good idea to bring it down. You can see now there's more detail in the clouds. Shadows, I brought them up a bit. I'm gonna do my own areas later with brushes, so I didn't bother too much there. The whites, I brought them up a little bit, and usually what I like to do is I like to go to the extreme end of both sides to see, like, okay, where are these areas most affected. I think you can also do that with the Alt. So if you hit Alt and move it, you can see where it's starting to get overexposed, I guess, in the different areas. So those are the lights. I mean, not a huge deal, but that's about the best spot right there. For the blacks, I just leave as is. It's already pretty dark. I mean, could bring it up a bit, but I think I'm just gonna keep it as is for right now. Clarity I always like to bring in, sharpens the image, and gives it a really good feel. It's like just adding polish after you wash your car. It just adds a great finishing touch to it. Vibrance I like to boost up a little bit. Okay, so now we're moving on to one of my favorite parts, which is where you do most of the color grading and you can really paint the scene to the way that you want it. I want to make this area more of like a red blood orange, so I'm just gonna try playing around with this. So the reds, there isn't really any in the scene, so it's not affecting any areas, so I can go ahead and leave it as is. Now the oranges, these should move, so if you slide it, this is gonna make it more yellow, this is gonna make it like towards a red. So I'm gonna put it to about right here, I think right around there. For the yellows, I want them to go towards, see, this part is like a bit more of orange, so I'm gonna try to focus it down here, so around the same area. Might no, for like 51. Oh, negative 51. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it as is there. Now, there shouldn't be any of like these really. Like, there's some green here in the grass, but I don't think it's going to change it much. And you can see if I do go to this area, it's changing the colors of the clouds. I think I'll probably just leave it as is here. Blues, there isn't much. I'm going to leave it. Purples, nothing. Just going to leave it. Magentas, I don't see any play. Going to leave it. For the saturation part, so I want this to be more of a stand out a bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just increase the saturation. So to about there. I don't know if that made too much of a difference. Maybe a slight, so I don't know. I'll just kind of leave it. Now the oranges, this is coming up for sure. So I think I'm going to bring it to around there. Yellows, same thing. But I don't want it too much, so I'm just gonna, like, cause this looks way too much. But if I just make it a bit more subtle around there, it should be good. Greens, there isn't, yeah, you can see it starts to affect the clouds, and obviously I don't remember seeing any green clouds. So I'm just gonna kind of leave that. Aqua as well. I want to get it to like more of a grayish. So yeah, gonna leave that. And there wasn't really any purple or magenta. Now the luminance, this will affect these areas in terms of how bright they are. So I can kind of play with that. If I go darker in the luminance, like, it really pronounces these colors a bit more, so I kind of like it right around here. I don't want it too dark, but I also want it to stand out a bit. For the yellows, I'm going to also touch them. Just make it brighter. Yeah, I like that. Are we doing anything with green? We can kind of make the clouds a bit brighter, more pronounced. The rest of these areas we don't really touch because they're not really in the scene. So now we move on to the split toning tab. What I usually start to do is I just increase the saturation of the highlights by about up to 10. And then I just go along the wheel and see which areas it's mainly affecting and which hue complements the photo best. So for this one, I'm kind of in between. I kind of like down here where this is like a bit of like the blue tone, and you can see in the background it like the blue against the orange kind of looks nice. So I like that, but I think I'm gonna stay with around this area here. I think that's the exact number I chose, but just bring it up a little bit so it looks like orange on orange basically, because there's the red and then it goes all the way to the magenta. Then in the shadows, do the same thing. Increase the saturation to 10 initially and move it along the slider. So I start to like it over here. Oh yeah, over here is pretty nice. I like it in the 200 range right there, which was around the blues. So I'm gonna go back down there. Around here is pretty good. I like that. I think that to me looks nice for just the overall color of the photo. To me, you know, people might like it a bit differently. This is the way I like it. I think you can take this photo many different ways and have equally good results, but This is the way I like it. Then moving down to the sharpening, I usually just add this. I boost it up to about 80, 89, something like that. Something I found from someone else's video when I was doing a bit of the, like, this is how I learned how to do different editing, was from other people. YouTube is a great way. The masking helps to identify the areas that are going to get sharpened the most. So if you hit Alt and move it down, like you can see, okay, it's going to sharpen most of the image, and then this is dialing it down to just different areas. So I like that. And I pretty much just leave it as is here. I think for the noise reduction, because as you sharpen, some noise is brought into the scene. I just brought it down a bit. So I'm just going to do it like that. I'm just going to leave the others as is. It's always good to remove the chromatic aberration. I find Lightroom does a good enough job, but if you found, I found that say if the car isn't one of these colors, you can actually just bring down the saturation of the purple or magenta down, and those fine little details that you usually get around like headlights and things like that helps to just get rid of them. Okay, now moving on to the vignetting. Well, I didn't actually, sorry, I should also mention that for this image I thought that it was pretty level, so I didn't really change anything. You can see like the line was hitting the roof and it was pretty even. So I think I got the settings in the camera fine for this. I also used the rule of thirds grid on the camera to help me just really dial it in and, you know, make it easy in the post process, so I don't really have to transform this image. In the effects, adding like a vignetting, I don't usually touch this, but in this case I think we can just drop it down a little bit so to make the borders a bit darker. So we'll make it negative. And then I'm just going to kind of leave it as is. I don't really want it to be too pronounced in this photo. For the calibration, I'm going to play around with the reds and the red, green, and blue. There isn't much of these two, but I think this is the area where we're going to have the most kind of play. So this is, okay, so I wanted it to be a bit more red. So I'm going to bring down the hue to around here. I think that's about good. And then the saturation. I'm not going to, I think that's fine around there. Right around there is good. The greens, let's see. So this starts to affect all around here. I think around there is about good. Saturation. So I'm going to kind of keep it as is here. So now that I'm pretty happy with the way that my photo is overall, I'm going to start to dial it in a bit more by using the brush tool and being a bit more selective with my edits. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to try to just bring out the shadows in the front of the car, as well as the wheels, adding a bit of clarity where necessary. Actually, I'll be adding a bit of clarity to the entire vehicle just so that it stands out a bit more from the background, and that should be enough for this photo to be good to go. So I'm going to go over to the brush tool. I'm going to go down to the effect, hit on shadows, and it's already like a preset right there. So I'm just going to have it a bit right around here, around the grill. Like I want it to maybe show off the Challenger part a bit more, and maybe just the more refined edges around here. So I'm going to just kind of boost it up. yeah, so you can see just the overlay of our spray right here, and I think we're covering the front end of it pretty good, as well as the sides here. Might even just dial it back a little bit. Right around there should be decent. Okay, now I'm going to do a new one, and if you want to see where your other edits are, just go over to show edit pins, and then I put them to always, so if I want to go back and edit it, I can just do that. Now I'm going to hit new. I'm going to go in, zoom in a bit here, and just kind of go down. Still using the shadows effect. And I want these rims to kind of stand out. Like, this owner obviously got these rims and, you know, I was quite happy with them, so I want them to stand out a bit more. So I'm going to do this. And I also want to add some clarity to them. Just help to define them, some sharpness. Let's see how our mask is. So, and if I want to take away some of the edges, I just hold Alt. I'm scrolling down on the wheel, and just gonna get a bit more so that's not overspraying onto other parts of the car. And same thing with back here. Don't want it to really go onto the asphalt, because then it could be a dead giveaway that, you know, I've done some editing work around there. Just want it to focus on the rims itself. And then now if I zoom out, it's looking pretty good here. Okay, so the next brush that I want to do is for the exposure of the car and the clarity. So I'm gonna cover the entire car here. I'm just gonna see where my spray is. Just want it to be a bit more focused. Don't want it to be too high, but I also don't want it to be too dark. I think about this area right here is about good. Just add another new one for exposure just around the front area here. Dial it in a bit more. But maybe just have it more focused on the front. So I'm just erasing away a little bit. Want this to really stand out and be the central point of the photo. I think it's nice and sharp in the front here. And yeah, all right, so you know what, I did go ahead and add one more brush, and this was for the clarity of the car. I think that having it just made it the last final touch that I needed, and when I zoom in, the details seem to really be there. I'm just gonna try to move around here. Everything seems to be nice and sharp. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way that this photo turned out. The last thing I like to do before I finish everything is just see what it would look like on its own without any distractions. So I just hit the F button on my keyboard, bring it up, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Yeah. So I'll definitely be sharing this with you guys on Instagram. This will probably hit Instagram before it hits the YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, check me out on Instagram. It's at Max Parks Photo, and I upload daily there. These are a lot of the photos I like to take, and hope you enjoyed. Thanks.